He had, in fact, though his sisters were now doing all they could for him by calling him Poor Richard, been nothing better than a thick-headed, unfeeling, unprofitable Dick Musgrove, who had never done anything to entitle himself to more than the abbreviation of his name, living or dead. Yes, my dear friends, Jane Austen just called somebody a dick. Welcome to Flipflops'n'Notebooks Book Reviews. I am Elliot, and once again, I am in the beautiful Fox Harbor Resort and Spa here in Nova Scotia. Behind me is Prince Edward Island. It's beautiful, so I heard. I've never been. It is hot. It is sunny. I feel very toasted. Bugs and spiders like to be attracted to me. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I am here to talk to you about Jane Austen's Persuasion. Yes, because in the light of the new movie that came out on Netflix, I thought I would give a little bit of a, shall we call it a discussion about Persuasion, about Jane Austen, about the era that she lived in, so on and so forth. So let's get started. Alright, so Jane Austen was part of the Georgian era, and more closely the Regency era. So the Georgian era spanned from the second part of the 1700s until about 1830. The Regency era was the time frame that Jane Austen was more popular. She started to publish her works more consistently, so that was around like 1810 to about 1830. Right, just to make it clear, Georgian era and Regency era, this was not the Victorian era. I know a lot of people think anything that is time period is Victorian era, which is very much romanticized in movies and in books and in shows. We're talking about a completely different era, which is a little less on the social and, how can I say it, like the social rules and conducts were a little less strict in the Georgian and Regency era than they were in the Victorian. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Also, Jane wasn't really a romantic. She wasn't pining for nostalgia as we see during the Romantic movement, of which Jane Austen is also part. I know a lot of different terms that I'm throwing at you. So what she did was she was in the present, and she described present social issues. So she wasn't really someone who very much romanticized anything. She wrote about what she knew, and what she knew was her present. Also, Jane was an established drinker, and I'm not talking about being an alcoholic. I'm talking about the fact that alcohol was a known and accepted beverage in her circles. We have evidence of her writing letters where she tells people, or I think it was even Cassandra specifically, that they're now well stocked up on port. She made a point of saying that now that she's a spinster, she will always get the best spot by the fireplace during social gatherings, and people will always refill her wine glass. And there's also a letter in which she describes saying that she have had a little too much wine the night before and now suffers from a hangover. And there's also this famous yet lost recipe of orange wine, which she also enjoyed quite regularly and with a lot of enthusiasm. Right, so it was accepted. It was part of that era. I just wanted to establish that before we go into any details talking about the movie. So Persuasion itself is a more mature story than, let's say, Northanger Abbey or Pride and Prejudice, and even Emma. It talks about or deals with regret and a sense of loss, because we have this woman who's now heading towards 30 years old, who's lost a chance for for a marriage based on love. And you can feel her frustrations and her regret, and a little bit the weakness that she felt in giving in to other people's influence over her, which does happen, right? And if you look closely though, the love story is just one part of the entire big story. There's so much more going on, and that's why I love Jane Austen so much, because you have a little bit of romance, so so you can get your fix, but then there's so much more going on about secondary characters which are completely ridiculous. We have the address of so many social issues, as well as just women trying to make it through life, right? So regarding the movie, I really appreciated a more emotional Anne Elliot, and there's a scene in the movie where she grabs the bottle and she talks about drinking wine. Also, there's a bathtub scene in which she's really sad with the wine bottle as well. So we have all of this. So it's not just to say that she was an alcoholic. It just kind of shows her, or it underlines her emotional frustration, excuse me while I try to get rid of this really annoying bug. And it shows that she's a fed up woman. She's frustrated, and it shows that even in Regency era England, women get fed up and frustrated with the social restrictions and rules they were placed under. I mean, for goodness sake, they weren't even allowed to have jobs. So it's not about balls and gowns and love letters all the time. It's really about the social restrictions that women had to navigate through. And as I said, Jane was quite local about certain issues and infused her stories with her opinions. I mean, look at Mary Musgrove. She makes it very clear that it is just so ridiculous that mothers and women should be the sole carer for children when they too deserve a social life. They're not just there to either, if they're spinsters, be cheap labor to take care of other people's children, or when they're mothers to do everything themselves. We're a lot more than that, right? And that frustration, again, I'm talking a lot about frustration, but that's it. The frustration and the being fed up really comes through, especially in the movie, and it really establishes a point. Dakota Johnson did a fantastic job of portraying Anne as a little bit more forward with her emotions, and she does break the fourth wall a couple times and really kind of just looks in the camera and makes connection with the audience to kind of shows like, okay, this is stupid, or we have a bit of a sarcastic look on her face, and it works. I really enjoyed it. And Jane might have been subtle about how she describes certain scenes and situations, but the intent was still very, very clear. And this movie took that attention and just magnified it. And it worked very well. I have to say, the movie was entertaining. I appreciated its take and perspective. I like the book as well. There's nothing wrong with either. I mean, the 2007 BBC production of Persuasion with Sally Fields as Anne Elliot shows a little bit more, I don't want to say subdued, but her portrayal of Anne Elliot is a lot more kind of like internal. Her body language and her face portray the anguish a little bit more internally, whereas this Anne Elliot is a little bit more open with it. It's just a way of interpreting the situation, and I really enjoyed both, and I have absolutely no problem with it. Alright, let me know what you guys thought of all of this in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome one.